So we're still on the subject of rejection. The girl doesn't seem to me to have any special perception or feeling which would lift that book above the curiosity level. And that was a rejection slip for Anne Frank's diary. Everyone who has ever made it to the top has had to endure rejection. You've had to realise that it's not personal. Consider the following. Angie Everhart, who started his modelling career at the age of 16, was once told by a modelling agency owner, Aileen Ford, that she would never make it as a model. Why not? Well, redheads don't do well. Everhart later became the first redhead in history to appear on the cover of Glamour magazine, had a great modelling career, and then went on to appear in 27 films and numerous TV shows. Novelist Stephen King almost made a multi-million-dollar mistake when he threw his CARRIE manuscript in the garbage after he tried and had 30 rejections. We're not interested in science fiction, they said, which deals with the negative utopias. They just don't sell. Luckily, his wife fished it out of the bin. Eventually, CARRIE was printed by another publisher, sold 4 million copies, and was made into a blockbuster film twice. In 1989, Google co-founders Sergey Brin and Larry Page approached Yahoo. This is so funny. And suggested a merger. Yahoo could have snapped up the company for a handful of their stock, but instead they suggested the young Googlers kept working on their little school project and come back when they had grown up. Within 5 years, Google had an estimated market capitalization of $20 billion. Google had an estimated market capitalization of $20 million, and at the time of writing, Forbes magazine reported Google's market capitalization of $268 billion. Oh dear, Yahoo seriously made a mistake. Sorry, who's Yahoo? That says it all. Even the first Harry Potter book, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, was rejected by 12 publishers before it found its home. Because she didn't give up, J.K. Rowling is now one of the richest people in the UK, with a net worth of $1 billion. Steven Spielberg applied and was rejected for 2 times for the prestigious USC film school. He ended up at the Cal State University in Long Beach. He later went on to produce and direct some of the greatest blockbuster movies ever. E.T., Lincoln, Saving Private Ryan, Jurassic Park, Jaws, The Colour Purple, Raiders of the Lost Ark. You name it, he's been involved in it. Ultimately giving Spielberg a net worth of $3 billion. 27 years later, after Spielberg became the first famous, USC awarded him an honorary doctorate degree, and 2 years after that, he became a trustee of that same university it rejected him. Here's Susan's story. Twice in her life, Susan Maybett's entire future was changed by generous acts of people who didn't even know her. Her birth mother did, which may have been only done as the kind thing to have done at the time. Instead of abandoning her into a grassland to die, she placed her in a crowded market, abandoning her where she knew she would actually be found. That simple act saved her life. A woman named Monica found her. Monica had virtually no money and already had 8 children. But she couldn't turn away Susan's cries. She picked her up and cared for her, and for weeks brought her back to the market, hoping to find her mother. Ultimately, she knew she never would. As poor as she was, Monica somehow found her way to look after Susan, and she became her 9th child. Well, Monica's love for her saved her and gave her hope that she could grow up and become anything she desired. She also knew firsthand of the realities of growing up as a girl in the Masai Mara region of Kenya. Most girls were married off at a young age, and when they got pregnant, their bodies actually couldn't cope with it, which actually meant they died in childbirth as a result. For these girls, there was no time for studies. Their days were really filled with walking just to fetch filthy water for the family, and when they got home, their chores awaited them. tiny fraction of the girls in Kenya who were lucky enough to get an education seemed like the chosen few. But too few escaped that vicious circle. Yet from a young age, Susan knew the education was her only way out of life, and the mass majority of women in her village had known for generations. And her only hope was a secondary school, the first and only school for girls near her village. In the first year, the newly built school was funded by an unstoppable foundation, and it announced it could only accept 40 girls from the entire region. So Susan studied hard at primary school, and because she was top of all the classes, she was confident she'd hopefully get a place. She applied to the university and eagerly waited the response. On the last day of the primary school, her heart was pounding, so she knew she'd get the news future on that day. When her teacher told her that she didn't get accepted, it felt like a death sentence. That night before the doors were open to the university, young Susan laid awake, unable to sleep, knowing somewhere 40 girls excitedly laid awake, anticipating their first day at school. They were probably preparing their black and red uniforms and looking forward to meeting new friends. But she had been condemned to a life of poverty in her village. But Susan was not willing to let this go, and her dream of a better life easily. The next morning she set out on foot to the university, miles away, on a dusty path. As she approached the school, she could see 40 lucky girls waiting in bright uniforms, laughing and playing. As Susan arrived, everyone turned to look at her. The principal approached and asked, "Why are you here?" Though Susan was terrified, she bravely said she'd been turned away by the school and needed to hear it directly because she simply could not believe that was the case. The principal gently explained that they only had room for 40 girls and 40 beds with 40 desks and 40 chairs, and unfortunately, Susan was the 41st. She tried not to cry. She tried to be brave, but the tears rolled away on her dusty cheeks, and she could not imagine how she would be able to walk home knowing this. As she gathered the strength to leave, the 40 girls began to surround her. One girl shouted, "Please don't make her go away. We'll move our beds together." Another girl pleaded, "I'll share my desk with her." Another shouted, "I'll share my books with her." Please don't make her go. The girls surrounded her, and it felt like a circle of protection, not allowing her to move. She was so stunned. The girls' generosity that day allowed Susan to attend the school for that year, and later, when the Unstoppable Foundation and a generous donor heard of Susan's bravery and how she had refused to believe that she couldn't be going to school, they paid for her tuition and made it possible for Susan to continue her studies and become the 41st student. So let Susan's story of perseverance in the face of rejection inspire you to never count yourself out. Even when there's a no, there's always a yes waiting to happen. Believe you will succeed and do everything in your power and never give up. And I will see you tomorrow.